There are a lot of states that actually have a state OSHA, if you will, that has jurisdiction within the types of manufacturing operations that operate within their state. So there's probably additional resources beyond that. But I think the one thing that OSHA typically depends on is employees to report, right? So if there's a flagrant issue that exists within a plant, employees have 1-800 hotline type numbers.
I kind of want to stay on the subject in terms of training. I think the average demographic in the steel space is anywhere from 45 to 60 years old. How do you train employees on how to adopt new technologies or new processes and systems that you implement? Is this something that these steel companies are trying to do internally, or are they outsourcing third-party companies to help? I mean, what does that picture look like?
Well, I think it's across the spectrum to a large degree. I think there are certain technology additions that the companies are kind of just deploying, in-house. Maybe a little bit of support from the technology provider in training the employees on how to use the equipment. The workers in the steel industry have been exposed to technology advancements. When I started, it was analog controls, and now you have kind of very sophisticated electronic control systems that have models that kind of predict outcomes that allow you to feed forward and adjust processes. So the equipment they operate, has seen this technology evolution. When it comes to technology innovation around kind of wearable type devices and safety related type devices, this is the next kind of area that I think we'll see some growth. So I think it's, you follow a similar model. You put together comprehensive, training programs. You try to make the technology simpler to use so that it makes it easier to adopt and train the employees on how to use it.
Do you feel these technology companies have really embraced the worker? Like, have they built technology that is so simple that anybody can use it regardless of your demographic or technological background?
I think some have and maybe some haven't. I've seen some good examples of, being able to deploy out of the box technology. Safety Inspection Manager is one that comes to mind, a digitized inspection checklist program that you're very familiar with. That one, you go through some basic training over the course of maybe an hour just to kind of teach employees how to navigate through the application and use the application and quote, execute the inspections. I think that's really simple. There's some much more sophisticated systems that are out there that require, maybe a more robust training program to skill the employees up to be able to manage and use it. So it's across the spectrum right now.
Can you discuss some of the regulatory landscape that affects steel? Like, how do OSHA, EPA, DOT regulations shape your daily operations?
So it plays a very instrumental role in shaping, what companies do and what type of equipment they operate and whether they upgrade equipment or they don't upgrade equipment. Regulations, have evolved over time. You look at all of the environmental control equipment that is embedded in steel manufacturing processes that's kind of standard issue today that maybe 35, 40 years ago either wasn't technology that was available or technology that wasn't seen as necessary to deploy. And I think, it's environmental regulations, OSHA regulations, a range of NFPA regulations, IEEE regulations, codes and standards have helped the not only steel industry, but across all industry, to evolve over time to create, I think, more reliable, less risk work environments for not only workers, but maybe even communities, depending on what the manufacturing processes are.
So it sounds like there's a lot of regulatory bodies. As a company, how do you manage all these regulations?
Well, you have certain professionals that really specialize and understand, that what are the emerging kind of regulations that are coming through, say, OSHA or maybe the EPA, or maybe there's a local environmental governing body that might exist. ANSI standards, FPA. There's a full range of professionals that deal within companies, or maybe there's even consultants that actually work on behalf of companies so that they understand how these regulations are evolving. In a lot of cases, these regulatory bodies ask for input from industry on how this will affect you, and they take that as part of their overall decision-making process as well.
So, in terms of the fines themselves, there's a statistic about the number of OSHA auditors that exist today. There's only 2,400. I mean, what's the likelihood of a steel manufacturing company getting hit with some sort of fine? Is it really that big of a risk? I mean, there's over 1 million businesses in the industrial space, and with only 2,400 people, you're talking years in order to do a single audit on one company. I mean, what's the likelihood of some sort of fine being imposed?
Well, I think it really depends on the performance of the company, right? Oftentimes, I think the numbers you're quoting are probably federal OSHA. There are a lot of states that actually have a state OSHA, if you will, that has jurisdiction within, the types of manufacturing operations that operate within their state. So there's probably additional resources beyond that. But I think the one thing that OSHA typically depends on is employees to report, right? So if there's a flagrant issue that exists within a plant, employees have 1-800 hotline type numbers to OSHA to be able to report those. So usually it's a escalation process. So usually it's, did you report it to your supervisor? Did your supervisor not act on it? How did you escalate it within the organization? And if the employee says, "Hey, I tried to get my supervisor for 2 weeks to take care of this and nothing's happened," that it wouldn't be unusual for an OSHA inspector to show up at the gate within a day or two. And usually it's those type of events that actually kind of start that process with those particular companies. The OSHA inspector comes in specifically looking to address that employee complaint. While they're there, they may ask other questions that could lead to a more expansive visit by an OSHA body and may even lead to a wall-to-wall audit. So depending on the circumstances, but oftentimes companies that really do try to give best effort to address issues that employees raise, that try to be proactive, to do inspections on a regular basis, to do follow-up actions to address deficiencies identified during inspections. Usually they have a cooperative relationship with their workforce, and the workforce generally doesn't have to call that 1-800 number in order to bring OSHA into it overall. I'm going to say, based on my experience, I don't really recall where OSHA just showed up one day just to say, "Hey, we're here to check out your facility," and just come randomly like that. I'm going to say that OSHA doesn't usually work that way. MSHA, on a different hand, which is another government regulatory safety body that kind of governs mining, they do have scheduled audits where they go in and they do inspections in facilities to address issues. So it can vary depending on the body.